So everybody, thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us for the first time, please and subscribe, share, and also hit the bell. If you're listening to us on the radio, thanks so much. If you're listening to us on the podcast, we appreciate you also for listening, and definitely subscribe, share, and hit the bell on that too. We interview amazing people who do amazing things all over the country and all over the world. And so thanks so much for sharing these stories. We have a person on here that I found out about through some reading I did, and I think he's doing magnificent work. And I'm sure he's been extremely busy through the past 2 years. And this is Dr. Rork. He runs Dog Is My CoPilot. And if you want to look at the website, you can go on www.dogcopilot.org. Again, dogcopilot.org. Dr. Rork, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate the time today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me and helping to get the word out.
All right. So like I said, you're doing amazing work, but for the people that don't know you, can you just give a little synopsis about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, originally I'm from East Patterson, New Jersey. I mean, an East Coaster. They don't even call it East Patterson anymore. It's called Elmwood Park or something like that. Lived there for early years of my life. Went to Ridgewood High School in New Jersey, off to Rutgers College, University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore. But when I was a child, I mean, I grew up in the time when astronauts were first coming on board, and who didn't want to be an astronaut growing up? So I always had that flying bug, and I got my pilot's license actually before I even got my driver's license.
Wow.
And so I've been flying a long time, actually over 50 years now. So flying has always been part of what I do. Bundle that together with the fact that I've always had dogs. Actually, I like my dogs better than most people I know. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, really. I mean, I practiced medicine for over 30 years, and I was an orthopedic surgeon, and I practiced in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And, I was always fixing people's problems. And interestingly, I'm still fixing people's problems, because this is not a dog problem that we're addressing.
Right.
We wouldn't have it if people would just be responsible in their animal husbandry and taking care of their animals, at least the way I do.
Right.
So I've been always flying. My wife and I would do the occasional pilots and pause flight, which, it's a nice program. It gives the guys, they use a dog as an excuse to go fly their airplane. For that one dog that they're flying, it's a real game changer, but it's really not making a mark. So my wife and I would do that, and she suddenly died 9 years ago in May of 2012. Absolutely crushed me. Quit medicine, didn't know what I was going to do. And then one morning, our rescue dog sitting next to me was looking up at, and I thought, I needed to get out of that really dark place that I was. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, if people have never experienced that kind of grief, good. I'm glad. It's just terrible. So I reached out to a friend of mine who's an attorney who specializes in getting 501c3s. Started the nonprofit Dog Is My CoPilot, and started flying dogs around kind of one at a time in the pilots and pause model, because I really didn't know any better. And then I met a gal in the Central Valley of California, Sharon Roman. It was on the 4th of September, 2012. And it absolutely rocked my world. I was so ignorant. I had no idea just how bad the problem was. She walked me through the local shelter that had a 94% kill rate. So 6 out of 100 dogs were getting out. And they were desperate to save these animals. They'd put them in the back of a van, 20, 30 at a time, and drive them to Portland, Seattle, Missoula, Salt Lake City, Denver. I mean, any place that would take these animals. So I said, and I had a small plane at the time. They would carry 6 adults. And so I said, Sharon, I'm your guy. I'll do this for you. So I took all the seats out of the aircraft, and I was able to fly 20 or 30 at a time.
Wow.
And what we do, we offer that long distance transport where it doesn't make sense to drive them. So if they could drive their dogs, 3 hours away, I mean, let them drive. But to drive them 16 hours to Seattle, I mean, that's brutal. It's brutal on everybody. You don't stop every 3 hours and let them out pee. I mean, once they're in the crate, they're in the crate till they get to their destination. So I started doing that for Sharon, and really I was kind of her best kept secret. She didn't want anybody to know about me. But the receiving partners also were getting dogs from other locations. So we started expanding our geographic area. And so I knew I had to scale up. And so 6 years ago, we bought a Cessna Caravan, which would hold 14 people. And it's a real hauler. It's a single engine, high wing turbine engine. So it's got a lot of power. And I went from carrying 20 dogs at a time to 200 dogs at a time.
Wow.
So now we're really, I mean, when I first started this in 2012, I was flying 1,000 animals a year. And now we're flying 1,000 animals a month. So we're really moving forward. And if I wish someday to get the news from Kara Pollard, my executive director, who does all the scheduling with me and keeps everybody in line. I wish she would call me one day and say, well, there are no dogs to rescue today. I mean, that's just not the case. I mean, the sending partners are constantly looking for receiving partners. And the receiving partners are kind of the rate limiting step here in terms of how many animals they can take. The learning process for us was that when I was flying 20 animals at a time, I fly them to one destination, one group, 20 dogs, day is done. Now we're flying 150 or 200, and nobody can take that many animals at one time. So it involves multiple stops or multiple groups or both. And so the one thing I learned early on is that when you load 200 dogs into an aircraft and close the doors, so all that panting fogs up the panel. I mean, think about high school prom night in the back of your Volkswagen Beetle. All right, you know what I'm talking about. So it's so that was one thing. Also, our flights are long distance. I mean, 1,000 miles. So I'm in the airplane for 5-6 hours at a time, and that's a lot of dog farts after a while. So you really kind of get used to it because I'm breathing the same air that they're breathing. So it's there's no escape from that. So we now have about 100 partners, 50 sending, 50 receiving, and it's we get them from the south, primarily Texas, New Mexico, Central Valley of California, and then fly them up north. And I mean, you could draw a line between Denver and Salt Lake City, and the farther south you get, the worse it is. A lot of that is that it's cultural. People don't spay and neuter. The weather's nice year round, so the dogs are outside running around breeding, and it's just a bloodbath down there for the shelters. I mean, and the groups that use euthanasia as part of their population control tools they're not bad people. They just don't have an option. So we offer that option. Now, granted, I mean, when you look at the big numbers across the country, 10,000 animals are being euthanized every single day, and we're saving, 1,000 a month. The problem is very big, but you have to start somewhere. And so I learned a long time ago that you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And so you need to do something. You can't just sit on the sidelines. And really, the people who are watching your podcast right now, I mean, let me tell you that there are 4 things that you can do if you want to be part of the solution. You can go out and adopt a dog, and better yet, adopt 2, because they keep each other company. I don't want to hear that, well, my dog is, I don't want him sitting in the house all day long for 8 hours by himself. Right. You think they're better off in a kennel waiting to be euthanized? The short answer is no. And remember that for every animal that you save, saves 2. The one that you save, and then the one that takes its place. So that's really important. If you don't want to adopt, you can foster. Get these animals ready for adoption. Teach them some basic voice commands, how to walk on a leash, interaction, getting them more domesticated. If you can't do that, then go by your local shelter and volunteer your time. I mean, who can't find a couple hours a week to go out and muck the stalls, change the water, feed the dogs, groom them, exercise? There's a lot that you can do. And the fourth thing that you can do.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The fourth thing that you can do is donate money. And really, if you want to see what we're doing with the money, just come out and watch. I mean, if you don't trust us, just drop by a bag of dog food or some blankets or some leashes or some collars or just do something. I mean, my gosh, if more people were to step up, I mean, this problem could be solved very quickly. Also, if you see a dog being abused in the neighborhood that's tied to a tree in the backyard 24/7, call animal control. I mean, I have one of my dogs that was, I got him because he was rescued from a situation in Idaho Falls where actually somebody went and talked to the owner. The owner didn't want the dog anymore. That's why I kind of tied up in the backyard. Now the dog's been with me for 3 years. Best dog I ever had. It's just amazing. I have 3 rescues. I've plucked them all off my flights. Rescue is my favorite breed. Not that breeders are, irresponsible. It's a backyard breeders, really. And if they don't sell their dogs, then they just dump them off at the pound. And that's kind of where we come in. So there are a lot of moving parts in what we do. I have 6 other pilots helping me now. We're flying just about every single day of the week. I have a flight, just went down to Merced yesterday and came back. Tomorrow we're flying down to Laredo, Texas. Saturday I'm flying down to Van Nuys, California. So even with the 6 additional pilots, I'm still leading from the front. I think that's really important when you're running a nonprofit, and I carry the title chief pilot, whatever the hell that means. I mean, I don't know. So it's I really appreciate the job that these guys are doing, and it's all volunteer. It's all volunteer. I have one paid employee, that's Kara Pollard. She's our executive director, and she works like 100 hours a week on this thing. I mean, it's embarrassing what I pay her, but she absolutely is committed to it, and it is a labor of love. I mean, when I first started this, and I thought, well, I'll save 10,000 animals or do it for 10 years, whatever comes first. I mean, we're coming up on 20,000 next week. I mean, so, we blew through that 10,000 number quite some time ago. And really, I had no idea what nonprofit meant. It means no profit, honestly. I was hemorrhaging money, but I emotionally committed both financially and time-wise for 10 years to get this thing up and running. And we're doing pretty well now. It's still a numbers game. I mean, it's expensive to run the airplane. But when you do the math, we're flying, it costs us $50 per animal per transport. So we're getting these dogs from Laredo up to Coeur d'Alene, Laredo, Texas to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, for $50 each. You can't do that. So when you go by your local shelter and they have an adoption fee, they're not trying to punish you. They're just trying to cover their expenses, and it costs a lot. You get these animals that are spayed and neutered. They have their 5-way vaccination. They have a health certificate. They still have all their issues, but I'll point my finger down and say, which one of you don't have an issue or two? I know I certainly do. So, you work with your dogs, you make them part of the family. It takes months for them to really kind of settle in. You have no idea what kind of hell they went through before they got to you. I mean, it's just, some of these situations have just been terrible. But people always accuse me of anthropomorphizing and projecting human emotions on my dogs. I mean, that's absolute bullshit. I mean, they have as much emotions as any other sentient being that I've come across. And, they're grateful. The rescue dogs are grateful. the dogs you get from breeders, you know, they feel entitled. But the rescue dogs, you know, they're right there with you. And, you know, I could stand there outside of a burning building with my dogs and I'd say, come on, we're going in. And they would look at me and say, as long as we're with you, I know we're safe.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the absolute love and devotion that they give me. I mean, it's just great. So they're with me. They follow me in the shadow. They sleep on my bed every night. I mean, it just, I always thought that a house doesn't really smell like a home without a wet dog smell. And so, I mean, I have that, and I just love that. Maybe that's why I'm still single. The women don't like that, but you know, whatever. So what I've been jibber jabbering here.
Yeah, no, I know it was great. I appreciate that because you answered a lot of questions in one. So I don't have very many questions left, but I do want to get to a few questions I have and a few audience questions. Again, for people that were listening to this amazing man and this amazing story, this is Dr. Rork. He is running Dog Is My CoPilot. Again, if you want to check out the website, it's www.dogcopilot.org. Again, dogcopilot.org. You know, I come from, as far as thinking wise, that, you know, we just had Ida, obviously, it, you know, really crushed New Orleans in general. You know, Florida has tons of hurricanes. Texas has their issues with hurricanes. We saw in Houston where there was huge floods. I believe that was like in 19. But there's been wildfires in California in 2020. We saw that and still going on. Tennessee has had their issues with tornadoes. So all these environmental issues are really going back to back to back in this country. Are you picking up a lot of dogs due to these issues? Because, you know, the house decapitates, the family doesn't bring the dog, the house floods, and then all these dogs don't have anywhere to go. Dogs, cats, all kinds of animals in general, for that matter.
Yeah, you know, you bring up an excellent point.
Mhm.
Well, first, when Kara and I sit down in February of every year and write out the whole schedule, we're packed. I mean, we don't have any extra room.
Yeah.
On those rare occasions when we do have extra room, we will answer those needs. But we learned a lesson a couple of years ago. There was they had a lot of floods down in New Orleans, and the shelters were kind of overwhelmed. They were screaming, "We need help!" So I did a couple flights out of New Orleans. I flew down there, loaded up the plane, took the dogs to Nebraska, to Wyoming, up to Seattle. And you know, the funny thing was that these dogs were displaced by the floods, and then a couple weeks later, their owners came by looking for them, and they're going, "Where's our dog?" And they said, "It's in Seattle." So, you know, so it created a huge problem logistically for them, and our
So
transport.
what happens with that though? If you're in Seattle and you get this dog and you're starting to love this dog, and this person in New Orleans is looking for their dog, what happens with that?
It's tragic. So so what we learned from all this was that if we're going to address that issue, what we need to do is get in there before the storm, empty out the shelters so that the dogs that roll in can be reunited with their family. So that's the role that we're now taking with that.
You brought up at the beginning of the interview, Doc, about, you know, guys having dogs chained to the fence, chained to a pole. I think that's really sick and mentally ill in my mind, because if you don't want the animal, you know, just give it up. I mean, why let it just die out there? And you talk about cruelty, that really is animal cruelty in plain English. So are those most of the situations that you know, that you're dealing with, is people bringing those to the shelters and then the shelters giving you those dogs?
Well, there is a large segment of owner surrender. There is a large segment of dogs that are picked up as strays. And often the dogs that are picked up as strays are returned to their owners, and then they just keep running away. And then the owners just get frustrated and say, "We don't want the dog back." A couple of years ago, when we were transporting dozens and dozens of huskies, And this all came from the TV show Game of Thrones, where there's some wolf dog or something. I think I'm one of two people in the whole country who's never even seen the
I haven't seen it either, so.
Okay, see, so it's just you and me, baby. So everybody went out and got a husky. They have no idea. They require lots of grooming, lots of exercise. They're voyagers, so they're constantly running away. They start out these cute little fluff balls, and they grow into these 80, 90-pound dogs. And the people say, no, we can't keep up with that. So they were being surrendered to the shelters in huge numbers. And so we saw a large upswing from that. And now, interestingly, now that the Game of Thrones have been off TV for a couple of years or so, those numbers are going back down. So we're seeing the pit bulls and the German shepherds and chihuahuas, you know, the little chihuahuas, the Mexican doorbells, I call them. So,
but are those the most dogs that you're getting as far as surrenders, the dogs that you just said?
yeah, the dogs that, they mostly the big dogs, you know, because people had no idea that they were going to get so big, and they required so much care. And I think that once you make that commitment to a dog, I mean, stick with it. It's not like having a child where, you know, the child will live 80 years. I mean, these dogs come and go. I mean, that's actually the very worst thing about a dog, is that their lifespan is so short. I mean, it's just they're around for 10 or 12, 15 years maybe. And then, so, you know, stick with it, hang with it. I mean, it just, I can't imagine ever giving one of my dogs up.
Right. Well, my thing is, we do live in the age of the internet. If someone wants to know about a dog, they should research it before to see if it's a good fit for themselves or their family. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do these things, but people are in dream worlds, unfortunately.
Pit bulls in particular are all tongue and tail. I mean, they are the friendliest animals. And, you know, they got a bad rep with the Michael Vick situation some years ago.
Sure.
And, you know, Best Friends down in Kanab, Utah, took all those animals in and really put them on the map. And we do actually fly at least once a month for Best Friends out of Kanab. But it's not a dog problem, it's a people problem.
Agreed.
And, you know, you raise a dog, I mean, same with your kids. You know, you look at a bad kid and it's a parenting issue. It's not a child issue. And so it's, my next dog is going to be a pit bull. I mean, I just happen to have I have a chocolate lab, a golden retriever, and a Queensland heeler. And so I need a pit bull to kind of round it out. I have my Queensland heeler was my 4,000th passenger. My chocolate lab was my 10,000th passenger. So I keep I keep stealing them off the flights. You know, I get to cherry pick, but you never know what you really have until you take them home and unwrap them. My chocolate lab, for example, I mean, he was the mayor of Crazy Town. I mean, this dog was I brought him home. He peed on every piece of furniture in the house. He had no voice commands, wasn't voice trained, had food issues. He was a voyager, was constantly running away. It was absolutely driving me crazy. 3 years later, he's the best dog ever. I mean, he sings when he sees me, and I've never had a woman do that for me. Lord knows. So,
well, I'll tell you, behind the scenes, that my sister has severe autism, and she got her dogs through Canine Companions for Independence. I'm not sure if you ever heard of them, but they have a hub in California, Florida, New York, Ohio, and stuff. But regardless, so one of the dogs just retired, and my father, you know, because he's, you know, I'm in Florida, but they're in Rhode Island. He takes care of the dogs, brushing their teeth, you know, going obviously to the vet once or twice a year. And those dogs, because they're lab golden mixes, they're so regimented on that routine of getting their teeth brushed. It's incredible that they won't leave you alone until they get it done. So they get their teeth brushed every night. But You know, you learn a lot, and those dogs were raised. They're not raised by us. They were raised by a puppy raiser, and obviously they're a totally different dog. But you learn a lot about, because I never had any dogs until they got one dog. She's going to be 14, and she just went to the vet. She's a Golden Lab mix. She's 54 pounds. She's in great shape. They gave her. We're trying to get her to live to 20, and that may be wishful thinking, but we're gonna try our best. But she's got in great shape. Another guy, the little guy that's now goes with my sister everywhere. He's 6, and he's Golden Retriever Lab mix, and they're great dogs. But that's why I'm bringing it up to what you said about having the Lab and the Golden. I am kind of surprised to hear that somebody would surrender those dogs because they're very extremely popular with people in general.
Yeah, you know, it's that's true. My chocolate lab looks like a chocolate lab. I had his DNA tested, and he's got every breed that I would never have. I mean, it's just amazing. But that's okay. My Golden's a purebred. My the
Wow.
Queensland Heeler, she's less a little bossy girl. So it's just you know, it's these dogs will just give you everything they have, and you know, you getting an older dog like that brings up an really excellent point that, you know, people, if their concern is adopting a dog or fostering a dog, is that really the option for me? Well, you know, go by the shelter and get an older dog.
Right.
Well, you know, it's less of a commitment, all right?
Right.
They're not going to be around that much longer, and they don't require that much activity, exercise, or even food. And so it's kind of a good break-in period. And
Agreed.
it's also giving that dog in the golden years of their life just a nice, comfortable, warm, secure place to be. I mean, it just, you don't want a dog to die of old age in a kennel. I mean, it's like throwing somebody in a nursing home. You know, it just
It's disgusting.
it's not nearly as nice as a nursing home if they're sleeping on cement floors.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, do that. I mean, I just go by and say, what dog has been here the longest? You know, I just start there and then go backwards. You know, there would be a lot fewer owner surrenders if these people had to actually walk their dog down to the room to be euthanized.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just, that would definitely solve the problem.
But I want to end again for people that are listening. This is Dr. Rork. Again, it's Dog Is My CoPilot. Again, www.dogcopilot.org. Definitely check it out. Donate, volunteer if you can, whatever you can do. With the last couple of questions, for the last 3 questions, Dr. Rork, can you tell the audience a special story, or maybe even 2, of experiences you had rescuing some animals?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was doing a cat and dog flight out of Merced over to Kanab, Utah, and the gal from Best Friends came over and collected the cats. And the crates that we use are kind of used over and over again, and they'll break down. And I had a dog that got out, and this dog was a runner. And so I'm running around the Kanab airport, which fortunately is a very quiet airport. It's got to be over 90 degrees in the sun, and you know, I'm about as fair skinned as you can get. And I'm trying to catch this dog, and I asked the gal for help. She says, I'm a cat person. You know, I'm going, oh, great. Okay. So I'm chasing this dog for about 45 minutes or so, and I'm getting frustrated. I still have dogs in the airplane. The aircraft is heating up. I got to get up again to destination. And I thought, screw it. I can't catch this dog. I'm just going to go. And then I thought, how is that going to look? You know, the dog is my co-pilot. We'll get your dogs halfway. You know, so eventually I caught that dog only because it got a cactus quill in its paw. Now suddenly it's like a tripod. And the only reason that I could catch up to the thing. So, and we also have dogs that will break out of the crates in mid-flight. And now and they'll work their way up to the front of the airplane, and usually the aircraft is packed so tightly, you wonder how they can do that. CBS Sunday Morning did a feature on us last year, and then reran it again last month. A very flattering piece that brought a lot of attention to what we're doing. And the intro picture that they have is me with a pit bull brindle mix up over my shoulder, is sitting right here. And, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm doing my Sudoku, just watching the world go by at 150 knots with, you know, 150 dogs in the back. And you don't have any idea that the dog is even loose until you feel this hot breath on your neck and the dog is just panting on you. And you look up and you go, well, you know, obviously it's not going to bite me, because they're not going to transport any dog that has significant behavioral problems.
Okay.
Because the senders and the receivers work together all the time. And if the sending group kind of slips in a dog with behavioral problems or health problems, that's the very last time the receiving group will ever take dogs. You did that to me once, so I'll never do it again. Right. So we'll have dogs that will break out, dogs that, and sometimes they'll jump out of the back of the plane as soon as we open the cargo door. But it's really rewarding. Again, the thing that is also rewarding is just how hard these people who work in the shelters are. And they come to the airport we load at 4:30 in the morning. We want to be wheels up by about 5. Keep in mind that our days are 8 or 10 hours of flying. And so when I get to the destination, their day is just starting. So I don't want to get there at 8 or 10 in the evening. I want to get there at a reasonable time for them. Plus the air is a lot cooler in the morning. We fly a lot during the summer and get really hot. We're only on the ground on the intermediate stops for about 30 minutes, taking on fuel, offloading. I mean, we have it really worked out well, working with the same groups over and over again, where they know the routine, they know what's expected. They don't come up and they look at each crate and you go, oh, what a cute dog. Here, get a picture of me with this. No, get that dog off the airplane, get the door shut, take off, get on to our next stop. And so it works really well. And they show up in the morning group, you know, they're like army ants. They're like hundreds of them coming at each stop. There are hundreds of people who will show up, and everybody wants to be part of that solution. And it's if you want to check our schedule, you can always reach out, and you should come out and see actually what we do. It's kind of you know, it seems chaotic, but it's really very well organized.
So Dr. Rork, as we end, we always like to ask the last question as a hopeful question. So, you know, you've been doing this for a little time now. Obviously, you've saved over 20,000 dogs, or you're about to hit 20,000 animals in general. So that's incredible. So with that, can you leave the viewers with some hope, whether it's hope that you see in doing this, or hope you've seen as far as, you know, rescues going down, as far as, you know, there's less dogs or cats having to rescue, any kind of hope in general, I guess I should say.
Yeah, well, we're addressing the issue because of podcasts such as yours. The word is getting out. I honestly had no idea how big the problem was, and then I learned. And the more that people learn, the more that we can address the issues. We've seen the number of euthanized animals in this country go down and down and down. And it's not a function of dog is my co-pilot, flying dogs from kill facilities to non-kill facilities. It's a function of the communities waking up and saying, we have a real problem here, and it's our responsibility, because this is not a dog problem. This is a people problem. And the people have to bring the solution. So the more that people wake up to the problem, the better. And so we're seeing that more and more. And also people are peeling out some money, and if they don't want to do any of the heavy lifting, let somebody else do the heavy lifting. But it takes money to get that done. And honestly, charity begins at home. And so go by your local shelter, go see what their needs are. Donate to them first before you donate to Dog Is My CoPilot. The thing written into our DNA is that we only fly from nonprofit to nonprofit. So I don't want any of your viewers calling me and say they have this little Pekingese that needs to get to Miami over to Las Vegas for their Aunt Shushu or whatever. We're not going to do that. We never charge the senders or receivers, and we only fly from kill to non-kill. Because the dog is in a non-kill facility, they're already safe. There are other dogs that need our help. So go out there, find out what your local shelter does, find out what they need, and help. Just help. I mean, you don't have to do a lot, but do something, please.
Dr. Rork, again, it's Dog Is My CoPilot, www.dogcopilot.org if you want to check them out. So, Dr. Rork, as we end, people can donate on the website. They can also volunteer. Is there anything else they can do?
Well, that volunteering and donate, adopting an animal.
Yeah.
If you can find whatever breed you want. People say, well, I only like golden retrievers. Well, go to petfinder.com and put in golden retriever, and you'll find 100 different golden retriever rescue organizations. That's where you get your next dog. All right. You might pay a couple $100 to get the animal because you have to pay for everything it gets to have that animal ready for adoption. Don't go to the breeder. I mean, that's kind of a last resort. I'm not saying breeders are bad, but let's get rid of this 8 million animal backlog that we have currently in our shelters before we go out to the breeders.
Agreed, 100%. Again, Dr. Rork, again, Dog Is My CoPilot. Definitely check it out, www.dogcopilot.org, and definitely help out if you can send a couple of bucks or volunteer in any way. Definitely try to do that. So thanks so much for doing what you're doing and all the organizations that really work with you. It's really amazing.
I will ask one favor of you.
Sure.
I want to come back a year from now.
It sounds like a plan. I'm definitely up for that.
I want to come back a year from now, and I want to review what we've done over the past year.
Sounds like a plan.
And I would really look forward to that. And if you're in Florida, maybe I'll just come down and do it in your studio.
Hey, if you're down there at the time, I'd love to meet you in person for sure.